The Witch's Hunger Part 1. Chapter 1, the 25th year. They called it a coincidence. A sad tradition. A string of tragedies that no one outside the family ever seemed to question too deeply. But every generation of the Calder family lost one child on their 25th birthday. Always the same pattern. Always the same silence. And always, the same absence. No bodies. No notes. Just a missing person, and a door left ajar. Tobias Calder turned 25 at midnight. And as the old clock in his hallway struck 12, he stood alone in the dark kitchen of the family estate, staring at a single candle on a slice of cake. He hadn't lit it. He hadn't made it. But it was there, waiting for him. And when he stepped closer, he saw something tucked into the frosting. A tooth. Human. Polished like pearl. Tobias didn't scream. He'd been expecting something. His cousin Mara had vanished the year before on her 25th. And she'd told him, days before she disappeared. "You'll feel it too, Toby. The hunger. It's not yours, but it'll want to be." He took the tooth out of the cake and held it in the flickering candlelight. It was engraved. With a symbol he didn't recognize, 3 crescent moons chained together by thorns. Something inside him shivered. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. In the hallway, a draft passed through the old Calder estate. And with it came the faint scent of burning leaves. Of soil. Of old, rotting herbs. Witch smoke. He walked to the mirror in the entryway. The same mirror that had belonged to his great-grandmother. The same mirror his Uncle Peter had smashed, 2 days before he vanished at 25. Tonight, the mirror was whole again. And written across it, in red ash, were the words. "The witch remembers. The hunger wakes." Tobias turned to run. But the hallway stretched. The doors melted away into shadow. And the only thing left behind him was the ticking of the old clock. 1 second for every Calder that had vanished. Tick. 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 And beneath it all, from somewhere beneath the floorboards, a growl. Chapter 2, The Hollow Book. Tobias barely slept. He sat at the kitchen table until dawn, the candle long melted into waxy streaks and the human tooth still sitting beside his untouched slice of cake. Outside, the estate groaned under the weight of wind and time. He had grown up in this house. But today, it felt like the walls were remembering something he wasn't supposed to know. At exactly 7:03 a.m., the clock in the upstairs hall chimed once. Just once. It had never done that before. Tobias stood, grabbed the tooth, and made his way toward the old study, his grandfather's room. The door had always been locked growing up. But today, it opened with a quiet click, like it had been waiting for him. Dust danced in beams of gray light. The smell of old wood, tobacco, and something faintly coppery lingered in the air. On the far shelf stood a tall bookcase. Its spine labels were faded, cracked. But one title caught his eye. History of Folkloric Healing in the Calder Region. The book didn't belong. It was too pristine. Too untouched. When he pulled it free, it felt wrong. Too light. He opened the cover, and found it hollowed out from within. Tucked inside, a yellowing envelope sealed with red wax and tied in twine. It was addressed in careful handwriting. To the next of us who hears it. MC. He broke the seal. Inside was a long letter, written in feverish ink. Some words were scratched out violently. Others trailed off mid-sentence, as if the writer had lost their nerve, or their mind. He began to read. "My name is Mara Calder. If you are reading this, I've already disappeared. Or worse, I've been rewritten. It begins with a hunger, not yours, but close enough to feel like it is. A hunger for touch, for light, for breath. You'll think it's madness. But it's her. The witch. She feeds every 25 years. On us. She doesn't eat bodies. She eats presents. She eats our names. That's why no one remembers. There was once a Calder who tried to end her. He cut out his tongue, carved symbols into the walls, and drank bitterroot tea until he bled from the eyes. It didn't work. She took his daughter instead. The only way to survive is to find the offering stone. It's still somewhere on the estate. I dreamed it once, in the greenhouse, beneath the roots of the elder tree. Don't eat. Don't speak her name. And above all, never say you're hungry. Even if you are. Especially if you are. The letter ended with a smeared inkblot and one final word, scratched violently into the bottom margin. She's listening. Tobias stared at the letter, heart racing. The house creaked again, soft, deliberate. And behind him, the bookshelf he had pulled the hollow book from had refilled itself. He stepped back, confused. All the shelves now contained volumes with his name printed on the spine. Tobias Calder, the candle. Tobias Calder, the mirror. Tobias Calder, the offering. Each book whispered faintly. And behind the shelf, just for a breathless second, he thought he saw a hand reaching out. Thin. Pale. Fingertips blackened like bark. Chapter 3, The Greenhouse Beneath the Roots. The letter trembled in Tobias's hands. It wasn't just the words that unsettled him, it was the way the house seemed to breathe as he read them. Like the walls themselves were listening. Watching. Waiting. He stuffed the letter into his jacket pocket and left the study without looking back. The house protested, its floors groaning underfoot. Every windowpane rattled, though there was no wind. He needed to get to the greenhouse. Now. Before he lost his nerve. Before she noticed he was moving. The Calder greenhouse had once been a thing of wonder. Tobias remembered wandering it as a child, before it was abandoned, when the glass still shimmered and the roses hadn't withered to thorns. Now, it was a skeletal ruin, half swallowed by ivy and rot. The path to it was overgrown, the flagstones hidden beneath layers of moss and dead leaves. As he approached, a murder of crows erupted from the roof beams with a noise like breaking bones. The greenhouse door hung crooked on its hinges. The metal was rusted, the glass fogged and broken. Tobias stepped inside. The air was thick, not stale, but sweet. Too sweet. The scent of rotting blossoms and wet earth clung to him instantly. Everywhere he looked, twisted vines crawled across the walls, choking the dead frames of roses, orchids, and nightshade. But at the very center, where the wild growth seemed most dense, stood an elder tree. Its gnarled roots split the tiled floor open like the earth itself had ruptured. The tree's bark was blackened at the base, and its leaves, what few remained, hung heavy and silvered in death. And Tobias felt it instantly. The pull. Not a sound. Not a voice. Not even a thought. A hunger. Low. Insistent. Coming from beneath the tree. He knelt by the roots, hands trembling, and began to tear at the earth with a broken shard of clay pot. The soil bled dark, sticky sap. The deeper he dug, the stronger the scent of burnt herbs became. His fingers scraped something solid, cold, heavy. A slab of black stone, etched with deep grooves that shivered in the low light. The offering stone. It pulsed under his touch. The letter's words rushed back into his mind. Find the offering stone. It's still somewhere on the estate. Don't eat. Don't speak her name. Never say you're hungry. Carved into the stone was the symbol from the tooth, 3 crescent moons chained by thorns, and below it, 5 hollowed-out sockets, as if something had once been placed there. Offerings. Sacrifices. Tobias's blood chilled as he realized. One socket was still stained dark, fresh. Someone had already made an offering. Recently. Suddenly, a sound split the heavy silence. A whisper. Thin and wet. Sliding along the inside of his skull like fingers against glass. Hungry, Tobias? He stumbled back, heart hammering. No one was there. Only the elder tree swaying slightly, though there was no wind. And from the broken window behind him, a shadow spilled across the floor. It wasn't the shape of a tree. Or a bird. Or anything he could name. It was too thin. Too long. And it crawled toward him. The candle on the offering stone flickered. A shape took form behind the roots. And Tobias, frozen in terror, finally saw her. A woman. But not. Draped in moss and bone. Her skin stitched with thorns. Her mouth sewn shut by vines. And her eyes, white as cracked milk glass, focused directly on him. The witch. She reached out one long, bark-scarred hand. And where her fingers brushed the ground, new roots burst upward, strangling the earth itself. She did not move like something alive. She moved like something starving. Tobias stumbled away, clutching the letter and the shard of clay like they were shields. The greenhouse warped around him, columns of dead ivy closing in like ribs. And through the glassless window, a new whisper floated on the wind. One offering remains. One hunger left to feed. Chapter 4, The Crypt Beneath the Ashes. Tobias fled the greenhouse. He didn't remember reaching the door. Didn't remember bursting into the misty cold of the estate grounds. All he knew was the hollow roar of blood in his ears, the letter crumpled in his fist, and the image of her. The witch with thorn-stitched skin. And eyes that had no light, only hunger. The old family crypt lay behind the Calder estate, beyond the abandoned orchard and past the broken garden gates. No one spoke of it anymore. The newer Calders were buried elsewhere, in town, in consecrated ground where nothing whispered and nothing grew crooked. But Tobias knew, even as a boy, that the crypt had a weight to it. A kind of gravity. As if it pulled all things down into itself, inch by inch. Now, it pulled him. The path was swallowed by weeds and mist. The trees leaned too close. The orchard was dead, but not silent. From the shriveled remains of apple trees came the creaking sound of unseen bodies swinging. Wind? Or something else? Tobias didn't want to know. He pushed forward. The crypt emerged from the mist like a broken tooth. It had once been beautiful, ornate stonework carved into the hill, great iron doors flanked by weeping angels. Now the statues' faces were worn smooth, eyeless, mouthless. The door was ajar. Not broken. Opened. Recently. Inside, the air was damp and sharp with mildew. Candle stubs littered the floor, melted into puddles of wax shaped like desperate hands. Tobias pulled out his lighter and flicked it to life. A thin tongue of flame danced, revealing row upon row of crumbling plaques. Nathaniel Calder, 1821 to 1846. Beatrice Calder, 1797 to 1822. Edward Calder, 1848 to 1873. Each of them dead before reaching 30. Almost all at 25. In the center of the crypt was an altar. Blackened by fire. Carved into the surface was the same symbol. 3 crescent moons, chained by thorns. And behind the altar, an iron-bound ledger. Untouched by rot or time. It was waiting. Tobias approached cautiously. The leather cover was embossed with a single word. Pacts. He opened it. The pages were filled with names. Each written in different hands, different inks. Each name signed below a vow. Some vows begged for protection. Some pleaded for love. Some demanded revenge. But all shared the same closing line. In exchange, I offer the hunger what is owed. Near the middle of the book, Tobias found a name he recognized. Mara Calder. His cousin. Her vow was simple. Take me, not him. His hands shook. Mara hadn't been taken by force. She'd offered herself. For him. A sound stirred at the far end of the crypt. A low rustling. Tobias lifted the lighter. And saw. A figure. Small. Familiar. Standing in the shadows beyond the graves. Mara. Or what had been Mara. Her eyes were hollow. Her mouth sewn shut with thorny vines. And her fingers bled continuously, dripping black onto the stones. She didn't speak. She couldn't. But she lifted one shaking hand and pointed behind Tobias. Slowly. Deliberately. Tobias turned. And saw that a new page had appeared in the ledger. Blank. Waiting. A quill resting atop it. Inkpot filled with something dark and shimmering. Not ink. Blood. The letter in his pocket crackled as if burning. The words flashing through his mind. Not everyone was taken. Some gave themselves freely. One offering remains. Tobias realized, too late. The offering stone hadn't been about appeasing the witch. It had been about inviting her. The hunger was awake now. And it wasn't just asking. It was offering. Chapter 5, Blood for a Name. The quill sat atop the blank page. Waiting. Its tip dripped black-red liquid in slow, heavy drops onto the altar stone. Each drop echoed through the crypt like a heartbeat. Tobias didn't move. Couldn't. Mara's hollow, broken figure stood just beyond the reach of his flame, a silent warning carved in sorrow. The offering was simple: sign your name. Feed the hunger. Live another year. Another decade. A full lifetime, if you were willing to leave someone else to starve in your place. Tobias took a step back. The crypt shuddered. The candle stubs flickered violently. From the corners of the tomb, shadows began to crawl, long-limbed, wrong-shaped, whispering in dead tongues that brushed against his mind like cobwebs. The witch was no longer content to wait. She was coming. He spun and fled the altar. Out into the open graveyard air, gasping. The mist had thickened to a clinging fog that coiled around his legs, pulling at him like hands. Every breath tasted of ash and bitter roots. The old orchard groaned in the distance, the branches swinging with something unseen. Tobias knew instinctively. She had no more intention of letting him walk free than a spider lets the fly escape once the web is spun. His grandfather had once told him stories of witches. But always in past tense. Old women hunched over cauldrons. Easily defeated by fire and faith. But this was no fairy tale, this was something older. More intimate. A covenant sealed not by magic, but by desperation. At the edge of the graveyard, Tobias stumbled and fell to his knees. The letter from Mara fluttered out of his pocket, caught by a sudden gust. It tumbled across the grass, caught on a broken gravestone. He crawled after it. Snatched it. And as he did, he saw what he hadn't noticed before. Another line, written faintly along the letter's edge in near-invisible ink, revealed by the mist's dampness. A final warning. Refuse to offer, and she will take without mercy. But offer something old, something broken, and the hunger might be tricked. Tobias read it twice. Something old. Something broken. Not a name. Not a living soul. Something else. He looked up at the estate. The rotting orchards. The broken statues. The burned-out greenhouse. The Calder family hadn't just been cursed. The land itself had been starved. If he could find a relic, something bound to the Calder bloodline but already withered, already worthless, maybe, just maybe, it could be offered in place of a living name. He ran. Back across the field. Back toward the house that groaned and breathed like an animal dreaming darkly. Inside the entryway, the broken mirror still hung askew. The faint ashes of the message, the witch remembers. The hunger wakes. Smeared. And fading. But it wasn't the mirror he needed. It was the Calder ring. The heirloom passed down for generations. Lost decades ago after a mysterious fire in the West Wing. But he remembered the stories. How it had been cursed even before the family. How it had belonged to the first Calder to bargain with the hunger. If he could find it. If he could offer it. Maybe he could satisfy her. Maybe he could survive. The floorboards groaned overhead. A whisper curled down the staircase, hungry. Hungry. The house was no longer just wood and stone. It was part of her now. A web spun across generations. And Tobias was already stuck. He tightened his fists. He had one chance. Find the ring. Offer it. And pray to whatever god still listened to cursed bloodlines that it would be enough. Because if he failed, he would not vanish quietly. The witch would devour every memory of him. Even the bones would forget he had ever lived. Chapter 6, The Ashes That Remember. The West Wing had been sealed for over 30 years. Tobias had only seen it once, when he was 6, before his father slammed the door shut and bolted it with iron from the inside. Nothing worth remembering lives down that hall, his father had muttered. Now, that was exactly why Tobias had to go in. The corridor smelled of scorched wood and mildew. A section of the ceiling had collapsed near the far end, letting rain and rot in over the decades. Moonlight slanted through the broken beams, catching on dust motes that swirled like ghosts trying to form. He stepped through the threshold. Every creak beneath his boots sounded too loud, like the house was warning something deeper inside that he had entered. The walls were black with soot, lined with warped portraits, paintings of Calder's long dead, their features twisted from fire and time. But their eyes had survived. Tobias could feel them. Watching him. Judging him. Recognizing him. The last of us, they seemed to whisper. The reluctant air. At the far end of the hall was a scorched door with a melted iron handle. The brass placard, though tarnished, was still legible. Nathaniel Calder. 1851 to 1876. The first offering. Tobias froze. The name from the ledger. Nathaniel had been the first Calder to sign willingly. He pushed open the door. The room beyond was untouched by time. Not in preservation, but in defiance. Blackened wallpaper hung in charred strips. The bed was no more than a skeleton of burnt wood and rusted springs. But in the center of the floor lay a circle. Drawn in soot and ash. Perfect. Unbroken. Within it, a small, blackened box. Tobias stepped closer. The heat was gone, but the air still felt charged, as though the fire that consumed this room had never truly ended. He knelt by the circle. The box looked like it had been crafted of bone, its surface carved with the same thorn-chained moons that haunted the offering stone. When he reached for it, the ash stirred. Not from his hand, but from something exhaling beneath it. He hesitated. But the whisper came again. Hungry, this time, from the box. Tobias broke the circle with his hand and lifted the lid. Inside was a ring. Heavy. Iron. Etched with the Calder crest on one side, and the witch's sigil on the other. And in the hollow of the ring, nestled in its metal, was something alive. A sliver of red. Not ruby. Not gem. Flesh. Still warm. Still pulsing. He didn't want to touch it. But he had to. He reached inside. The moment his skin brushed the ring, a flash of images tore through his vision. A boy, Nathaniel, screaming in firelight. A woman of thorns holding out her hand. A circle of stones soaked in blood. The sound of chanting, then choking silence. And the final image, the ring slipping from her finger to his. The witch's mark was not forged. It was past. Tobias staggered back, clutching the ring. It was cold now. The box crumbled into ash in his hand. But the ring remained. Heavy. Demanding. Hungry. From the hallway behind him came a sudden sound. Footsteps. Deliberate. Bare. Wet. He turned just in time to see a figure step through the shadows. Not Mara. Not his father. This one was tall. Cloaked in firelight and moss. And as it stepped into the ruined moonlight, he saw her face. The witch. No longer just a memory or a whisper. She had entered the house. The offering was due. Chapter 7, The Ring That Chooses. The ring pulsed against Tobias's palm. Not warm. Not cold. Just, present. As though something inside it had finally opened its eyes. He backed away from the ashes of the box, retreating toward the cracked door. The witch's silhouette loomed in the corridor beyond, motionless, yet full of a pressure so unnatural that even the flames from the nearby ruined candle stilled, as if afraid to flicker. Her form was draped in rotted green cloth, trailing moss and bone charms that clacked softly with each slow step. Her head tilted, just slightly. The thorn-stitched lips didn't part. But he felt her speak. Not in words. Not in voice. In will. The ring is claimed. Tobias's heart pounded. The ring vibrated now, harder, deeper, like it was alive, like it was preparing for something. He shoved it into his jacket pocket and ran. Through the collapsing hall. Down the warped stairs. Back through the winding corridors of the estate. He heard her behind him. Not running. Just moving. And with each step, the air grew heavier. The wallpaper peeled from the walls. The floor wept sap from the wooden planks. Pictures of his family, still hanging on the walls, blackened as he passed. Their eyes erased. Their faces smeared. The hunger was waking. He reached the library and slammed the door shut, bolting it behind him. Silence. Then. The ring in his pocket burned. He pulled it out, wincing. And there, etched across its surface now, fresh, glimmering, was a name. Lena Calder. His cousin. Alive. Living 2 states away. They hadn't spoken in years. But the ring had chosen her. No, he whispered. No, that's not how this works. But the ring responded. Images hit him like a blow to the head. Lena brushing her hair in the mirror. Her reflection twisting behind her. A whisper under her bed at night. The smell of burnt herbs drifting through her window despite a sealed house. The curse had already reached her. The witch knew he wouldn't offer himself. So the ring had found another. Tobias stumbled back, clutching the ring like it might bite. The letter in his jacket felt suddenly heavier, like it knew what he was seeing. Offer something old, something broken. He'd thought the ring was the offering. But the ring wasn't the gift. It was the vessel. And it wanted to deliver Lena. His eyes darted to the fireplace. A faint glow remained in the ashes. Could he destroy it? Could he melt it? Break the chain? He grabbed the iron poker and placed the ring into the embers. It glowed red. Then white. Then laughed. Not aloud. Inside him. A rattling sound made of grief and rusted metal. The fire died instantly. And the ring sat untouched, cool and clean, waiting in the center of the ashes. He collapsed to the floor, breathing hard. Lena. If he didn't stop it, she would be the offering. And he would live. Because the ring had made the decision for him. But something about the name gave him pause. Because Lena. She had the ring once. Years ago. He remembered it now, faintly, seeing her slip it on during a family party, laughing. His grandfather had snatched it from her and locked it away. He'd said, "That one doesn't belong to you. Not again. Not again." The ring had chosen her before. This wasn't new. This was repetition. The hunger didn't forget. It circled back. Again and again. Until the right name bled. Tobias stared at the ring. It stared back. Waiting. Chapter 8, Dreams of Thorns. Tobias didn't think. He grabbed his keys, his jacket, and fled the estate before he could second-guess himself. The house groaned behind him, almost laughing, as the front door slammed closed on its own. He didn't dare look back. The hunger wasn't in the house anymore. It was awake everywhere he went now. It was riding his blood. The drive to Lena's hometown blurred into mist and half-formed thoughts. The old Calder ring sat cold on the passenger seat beside him, bound in a tangle of red twine torn from an abandoned journal he found in the house, a desperate, childish attempt to contain it. The farther he drove, the heavier the ring seemed to become. By the time he reached the town limits, it weighed on him like a confession he couldn't take back. Lena's neighborhood was quiet. A tidy grid of aging houses with sagging porches and cracked sidewalks. The sky boiled overhead, a swollen bruise of low clouds, purple and green at the edges. Tobias pulled up outside her home. Everything looked normal. Except the trees. The ones on either side of her house were dead. Not dying, dead. Their bark blackened, their branches clawing the air like begging hands. He knocked on her door. No answer. He knocked again, harder. Still silence. He tried the handle, unlocked. The door swung open with a moan of old hinges. The house was cold inside. Unnaturally cold. The air smelled wrong, something like wet leaves and burnt sugar. He stepped into the living room. Every mirror was covered in cloth. Every clock stopped at midnight. And drawn in chalk on the wooden floor was a circle. Crude. Rushed. Broken in several places. Protection, maybe. Failed protection. He moved through the house. Room by room. Until he found her. Lena sat in her bedroom at the far end of the hall. Still. Breathing. Awake, but not awake. Her eyes were open, glassy and unfocused. Her hair hung around her face in wet tangles. In her lap sat a pile of withered thorn branches, as if she'd been weaving something in her sleep. On the floor beneath her chair, small pools of ash gathered. Falling from her fingertips. She was crumbling. She was dreaming even while standing. And she was smiling. Tobias rushed forward. "Lena," he shouted, grabbing her shoulders. She blinked slowly, too slowly, and for a moment, he saw it. The witch's reflection behind her eyes. Staring through her. "Hungry," she whispered. The same word the witch had breathed through the trees. The same word that had haunted the estate. Tobias shook her gently. "Fight it, Lena. Please. You're not alone." For a flicker of a second, her pupils focused. Recognition. "Toby," a whisper. A threadbare thread between them. Then, her hand shot out. Grabbing the ring from his jacket pocket. The twine unraveled in an instant. And the ring clung to her fingers, fitting perfectly, as if it had never belonged anywhere else. Tobias tried to pull it away. The moment he touched it, visions flooded his mind. Lena walking into the woods, barefoot and blind, following the sound of someone singing her name. Lena kneeling before an altar of black stone. Lena placing her hand willingly into the mouth of the elder tree in the greenhouse. The witch had chosen her long ago. Before Tobias was even born. The hunger had been circling, waiting for her to remember the deal she'd made as a child. He staggered back, gasping. Lena rose slowly from the chair, the thorns from her lap cascading to the floor. Her voice, when she spoke, was two voices layered on top of each other. One hers. One ancient. One starving. "I called her. I made the wish. Now I must feed her." Tears streamed down Tobias's face. He realized with horror, Lena hadn't just been cursed. Lena had invited it. She had summoned the witch. All those years ago. As a lonely, frightened child, desperate for something she didn't understand. And now, the payment was due. Chapter 9, The Price That Cannot Be Denied. Lena stood in the center of the room, her shadow stretching outward in every direction at once. Not a trick of the light. Not a trick at all. The ring on her finger gleamed wetly, as if it were bleeding unseen tears into her skin. The air around her pulsed with a sickly, rhythmic beat, like a second heart buried just beneath the floorboards. Tobias took a cautious step forward. "Lena," he said, voice breaking. "You don't have to do this." Her head tilted slightly, like a puppet whose strings had been slackened. "I already did," she whispered, two voices woven together, her own, and something deeper, something old as stone and rot. "I made the wish." She answered. "And now?" Lena raised her hand. The ring burned brighter. "I must answer her." Tobias lunged. He grabbed her wrist, trying to pry the cursed thing off. The moment his skin touched the ring, the room shifted. He wasn't standing in Lena's bedroom anymore. He stood on black soil, surrounded by dead trees, under a sky split with violent cracks of red lightning. The air smelled of salt and blood and something much worse, something that made his teeth ache and his bones hum with hollow dread. Before him rose a figure. The witch. Closer now. Real. She wore no mask. Her face was a crumbling ruin of bone, bark, and thorn. Her eyes were two bottomless wells, reflecting not light, but the absence of it. And she spoke, not in sound, but inside his chest. Payment. Promise. Hunger. Tobias stumbled back, heart hammering. He looked down at his hand, and saw his own name beginning to etch itself into the ring alongside Lena's. It wasn't just choosing her anymore. It was choosing him too. He realized with a jolt of terror. Saving her wouldn't be a rescue. It would be a replacement. The hunger didn't care whose flesh fed it. Only that the debt was paid. And Tobias, by trying to intervene, had offered himself up like a lamb stepping willingly onto the altar. The witch drifted closer, her thorned arms outstretched. From the corners of his vision, other figures emerged from the dead forest. The Taken. Mara. Peter. Nathaniel. Dozens of Calders whose 25th year had ended without warning. Their mouths were sewn shut. Their eyes hollow and pleading. But they reached for him, beckoning, welcoming. One must feed. One must forget. One must remain. Tobias screamed against the pull. No! He shouted. Take something else. Something old, something broken. The witch paused. The ring shivered violently on Lena's hand. And a third voice, not the witch's, not Lena's, rose up from the roots of the black trees. Offer the hunger what cannot be eaten. Offer the memory, not the flesh. Memory. The idea struck him like a thunderclap. Not a body. Not a life. A memory. The true map of the Calder curse. And he held it out. A trade. The witch stopped. A silence heavier than death fell over the broken land. One long moment passed. 2. Then, the thorned mouth of the witch smiled. And with one talon-like finger, she reached forward. Touched the letter. It withered to ash in Tobias's hand. The black sky ripped open. The dead forest collapsed inward. The Taken screamed, not in pain, but in release. Their bodies dissolved into petals of ash that spun upward into the void. The ground beneath Tobias cracked. Fell away. And he fell with it. He hit the floor of Lena's room with a crash. The chalk circle was gone. The air smelled clean. Normal. Tobias blinked, dazed. The ring lay on the ground between them, cracked and blackened, utterly inert. Lena gasped and collapsed into his arms. Alive. Breathing. Freed. He clutched her tight, not understanding yet what price had been paid. He only knew that the witch's hunger had been answered. And for now, they had survived. But survival always has a second cost. And deep inside his chest, Tobias felt a hollow place where something precious used to live. A memory. A piece of himself. Gone. Chapter 10, The Whisper That Waits. 3 days passed. Lena hadn't spoken once since the ring cracked. Not from fear, nor shock, but because something inside her had changed. Tobias could see it in her eyes. A depth. An echo. Like someone who had heard a language not meant for the living and remembered it in her bones. She sat on the porch of her little house, staring into the trees that surrounded her street. The dead ones had been cut down the day after. The city assumed rot. Disease. But Lena knew better. They hadn't died. They had been listening. Tobias stood inside, watching her through the kitchen window. He couldn't sleep anymore. He couldn't eat. Not because he was scared. But because he felt it. A gap in his soul. A place where something used to be. A memory of his mother's voice. A birthday. The name of a song he used to love. Gone. Traded. The witch had taken it without teeth. But the wound still bled. That night, Lena finally spoke. I didn't make a wish, she whispered. They sat at her kitchen table. The windows were closed, but the curtains shifted as though a breeze moved through them. Tobias looked up. What do you mean? She swallowed. I was a child. I didn't wish. I just said I was lonely. I cried into the dirt and asked for someone to see me. Her eyes brimmed with tears. She heard me. She didn't grant a wish. She answered a need. Outside, the wind began to howl. Lena's coffee mug cracked down the side. The hair on Tobias's arms rose. Something had shifted. Again. He stood and opened the front door. The street was empty. Dead quiet. Too quiet. No insects. No distant traffic. Only a strange, rhythmic sound, faint, like a chant spoken far away. Come home. Come home. Tobias stepped outside. And saw something that turned his blood to ice. Across the street, in the window of a neighboring house, a woman was staring at him. Still. Pale. Wearing a nightgown soaked through with what looked like ink. And on her hand, a ring. He blinked. And she was gone. Just the curtain left swaying. He turned to Lena. She's moving, he said. She's moving through the bloodline. Lena nodded slowly. She's not bound to the Calder house anymore. Tobias looked down the street. Lights flicked on. One by one. Figures appeared at windows. In doorways. Half-seen silhouettes. Watching. Waiting. He realized with sudden, gut-wrenching clarity. The witch had not been defeated. She had been released. What had once been a curse tied to a single estate now drifted like smoke through blood and memory. She no longer needed the offering stone. She had names. And she had learned how to find them. Tobias opened the cracked journal again. Pages were missing. Burned away. But new ones were writing themselves. A list of descendants. Names he didn't know. Distant cousins. Forgotten branches of the Calder tree. Each name faded in at the top of the page. And as he watched, one name disappeared. Erased. Taken. He looked at Lena, eyes wide. She's feeding again. Chapter 11, The Calder Who Hid. The journal shook in Tobias's hands. Ink flowed across the fresh pages like veins, etching names faster than he could read. Each name shimmered, then dimmed. One every few minutes. Gone. Forgotten. Erased from more than memory, from existence itself. Lena stood behind him, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder. There was no panic between them now. No screaming, no chaos. Just the heavy understanding of a countdown they couldn't stop. Unless they found someone who had beaten the curse before. Someone who had not simply hidden, but survived. Tobias flipped frantically through the journal's back pages. Near the final section, buried under layers of soot-stained script and burned edges, he found a reference. A name he barely recognized from his father's half-remembered rants after too much whiskey. Edith Calder. The black sheep. The exile. The Calder who had turned her back on blood and bone. Edith, Tobias said aloud. Lena frowned. She's alive? If the stories were true, she left when she was 17. Refused the family's traditions. No one heard from her again. Lena leaned closer. And you think she survived? Tobias shrugged. I think, she knew something the rest of us didn't. The journal offered no address. Only a note, scrawled beside her name in an almost childlike hand. The place where trees grow from stone. Tobias's mind whirled. He thought of old family maps. Old legends. He thought of a place, half myth, half warning, his grandfather had once whispered about. Stonewood Hollow. An abandoned settlement deep in the mountains, where ancient trees grew out of petrified ground, their roots curling through cracked stone like veins in a corpse. A place forsaken by roads. A place forgotten by time. If Edith was anywhere, it would be there. Hidden from the bloodline. Hidden from the witch. Maybe even hidden from hunger itself. They packed what little they could: flashlights, rope, the cracked journal, Lena's grandfather's hunting knife. The moment they left Lena's house, the air shifted. The wind carried faint whispers. The clouds bled together in dark veins overhead. The town behind them seemed to sigh, as if exhaling their names into the waiting dark. The drive was long. The highway twisted into broken two-lane roads. Civilization thinned. Gas stations became fewer, then vanished altogether. Streetlights ended. The trees grew taller. Heavier. The mountains swallowed the sky. As they neared Stonewood Hollow, Tobias felt the temperature drop. His breath misted in the air, even though the car's heater roared. The woods closed in tight around the road. Branches scraped against the car like grasping fingers. Finally, they saw it, a crude wooden sign, half-rotted, swinging from rusted chains. Stonewood Hollow Estate 1813, abandoned 1944. Beyond it, a path barely wide enough for a car veered into darkness. No lights. No welcome. Only mist rising from cracked stone where trees had forced their way up through ancient ruins. Tobias pulled the car off the road and killed the engine. They would have to walk from here. The ring of the keys jangling in his hand sounded too loud in the hush. The woods themselves seemed to listen. And from deep among the petrified trunks, a soft, broken voice whispered. Come back to the roots. Come back to where the hunger first tasted. Lena gripped his arm. They know we're coming, she said. Tobias nodded grimly. Good, he said. Because for the first time, anger flared in him brighter than fear. If Edith Calder still lived, if she had survived the hunger, then she might hold the key to ending the witch's curse for good. Or at least, dying on their own terms. They stepped into the ruins of Stonewood Hollow. And the forest swallowed them whole. Chapter 12, Echoes in Stonewood Hollow. The moment Tobias and Lena stepped into Stonewood Hollow, it felt like they had crossed a boundary the world had long since forgotten. The trees weren't just old. They were impossible. Great petrified trunks loomed upward, gnarled like skeletal limbs, their surfaces mottled with deep gray veins and black moss. Roots cracked through the ancient cobblestone paths, as if the earth itself had tried to reclaim the sins buried here. No birds sang. No insects buzzed. Only the wind, low and mournful, whispering through the hollowed wood. They moved carefully, flashlights cutting narrow tunnels of pale gold through the mist. The ruined town sprawled in all directions. Crumbled stone foundations where houses once stood. Collapsed wells. A shattered church steeple, tilting against a dead oak. Everything smelled of damp earth, iron, and something fainter, hidden beneath it all. The faint coppery scent of old blood. This is where it began, Lena whispered, hugging her jacket tight. Tobias nodded grimly. The Calder curse hadn't been born in their mansion. It had been planted here. Nurtured. Fed. And it had learned to grow beyond its cradle. They passed a broken stone fountain at the town center. The basin was dry, cracked into spiderweb fractures, but Tobias noticed something strange. Around the rim, carved in ancient hand, were words barely readable beneath lichen and rot. Hunger is a garden tended in silence. Beneath that, scratched hastily and newer. She waits under the oldest root. Tobias and Lena exchanged a glance. Someone had left that second message. And recently enough that it hadn't yet been erased by weather or time. They pressed deeper into the ruins. The mist thickened. Shapes flickered at the edges of their vision, too quick to be fully seen. The trees here grew stranger, their bark peeling away in strips to reveal surfaces that shimmered like wet stone. And everywhere they looked, symbols were carved into trunks, stones, and doorframes. The same thorn-chained moons that haunted the offering stone. Variations on closed eyes and open mouths. Spirals, twisted tighter and tighter toward unseen centers. A language of hunger and silence. A map etched by fear and necessity. After nearly an hour of careful exploration, Lena spotted it first. A trail. Barely noticeable. A series of shallow carvings, symbols matching those they had seen, forming a rough spiral pattern along a narrow, overgrown path that wound behind the ruined church. A path the mist seemed reluctant to cross. "This is Edith's mark," Tobias said, studying the nearest carving. The edges were fresh compared to the rotted stone around them. She had been here. And she had left this path. Not to invite. But to warn. They followed it. Step after step, the forest grew heavier. Every breath tasted thicker. The petrified trees leaned closer. Somewhere beyond them, the faintest sound began to hum. Low. Throbbing. Not mechanical. Not animal. A heartbeat. A pulse. Coming from underground. Finally, the path ended at the mouth of a massive hollow tree, its insides rotted out, black as pitch. Above the entrance, someone had carved in a jagged hand. "Only the lost may find the last calder." Tobias stared into the void inside the tree. He felt the pull, like a hook sunk into his ribs, drawing him forward. But he hesitated. "We have to go inside," Lena said, voice steady but trembling. Tobias nodded. He understood. If Edith Calder had survived, this was where her secret would be buried. But so, too, would be everything the Calder bloodline wanted to forget. With a final glance at Lena, Tobias stepped into the hollow. And the darkness swallowed them whole.
The story may end here. But the darkness never sleeps. Like this video to keep the shadows stirring. Share your whispers in the comments. Your voice shapes the next nightmare. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Gothic Hour Stories and Mysteries, where every tale lingers and every soul leaves a mark. The Gothic Hour awaits.